Welcome to an old guy playing games. Most of my videos are playthroughs, at least so far they have been, but I will take time at the end of each game to kind of throw my thoughts together, which is what this video will be. If you like either kind of content or both, if you like what you see here, please, hit the like button down below. If you really like it, subscribe so that you can get, notifications when I put up new stuff in the future. I'm putting it up fast and furious in the last month and a half. That's probably going to slow down now. This is where I'm at. So I've recently finished playing Dragon Age Veilguard. Just to have a few kind of little caveats up front, make certain you understand where I'm coming from before we get too deep into this. There may be some spoilers. I will do my best to avoid that. I'm already having to think about how I'm going to kind of have to dance around some of the bigger ones to say what I want to say. But there may be some. I can't promise there won't be any. I installed the game on release day and started playing it the very next. And it was about 50 days later, 48 days later, something like that, that I finished the game. Steam says I put in 100 hours. The videos, if you go back and look at my playthrough videos, add up to 70 some hours. That's a lot of time, right? So I spent a lot of time in that time playing the game, and then you add all the time having to go back over and edit and all that. And, it's a significant amount of time I put in. There must be something right with this game, but we'll get there. I'm still in the caveat section. I've got notes here. I don't have a script. So I've only played it through once. That's half true. I've started a second playthrough in the last day or two, and I will have a few thoughts on that. But I played it through as a female elf rogue with a duelist specialization and a shadow dragon background at adventure level. All those things have a potential to impact certain conversations, certain outcomes, certain play styles. There's no question that in previous Dragon Ages, the two-weapon rogue has seemed to have been my real favorite, and so that's why I started with it in this case. But that will have impacted some of how I experienced the game. Overall, I'm going to be trying to... it's going to be a lot about what I thought, what I liked, what I didn't like. I may have some comments about whether I think the game succeeded in doing what I tried to do. But I'm going to be very clear that those are two different things. And whether the game is good and whether I liked it is two different things. There are certainly games, movies, books, whatever along the way that are very, very good that I'm not particularly fond of, and vice versa. I recognize the difference between those two things. Along the way here during my playthrough, there were a few comments left that some of them I really enjoyed, a few I had to respond to, and may have me shade a little bit what I'm going to cover here and how I'm going to cover it. That's fine. I have not gone out and been reading reviews. I've certainly seen headlines for reviews, both written and YouTube, reviews. I'm quite aware that, headlines don't necessarily match content, and there's plenty of people who write reviews who, in fact, write a headline first and then write a review to match it. So I don't consider that kind of review an honest review. And if you look through my stuff, you're going to see a place where I say, hey, here's my thoughts on Dragon Age Veilguard after playing it for about 20 hours. I was being very clear about the fact that that's how far I was into the game. Now I have finished the game. These are my thoughts now that I have finished the game. They're probably not that different, but it gives you an idea where I'm coming from. There is another caveat that I will cover later when I get to the appropriate part of the stuff we're going to talk about. It would be more appropriate to bring it up there. So, first, my short version of what I think. It's a good game. It may be a very good game. I enjoyed it. Like I said before, Steam says I have 100 hours in there. My videos add up to like 70 or 80 hours, whatever it is. I've spent a lot of time on this game. And quite frankly, while recording this video, there's things I kind of shortcut and didn't do that on a personal playthrough I will spend more time on. And we'll talk about that some more down below too. But so that says something that I think the game works. So Gameplay. I enjoyed the combat system. It moved nicely, but, you know, I played with a controller, hit that right button, everything pauses, and I have all this information on the screen. I can see everything I need to know to make decisions, tell my companions what I need them to do, see how skills interact so I can pull off the appropriate combinations to get what I want. All that right there, and I think a pretty well done interface. There's a lot of ways to short circuit that interface with various key combinations. I'm an old guy. When you tell me I have to hold on the left trigger while hitting X and the right trigger, sorry, I can only do so much. I'm just sorry. When I started gaming, a joystick had, you know, a stick and a button. You know, it takes a, you know, I just did not develop those habits back then. I struggled greatly with doing good blocks, and again, I think some of that's my age and the way my eyes and the way I process the screen works. I just don't think I'm seeing enough of the screen to properly time my blocks. And it's end up focused on the halo that appears around my head instead of seeing the actual movement that's causing that halo to appear and understand exactly when to hit the button. Dodging, on the other hand, hey, no problem. You dodge early, you're still out of the way of the shot. But you block early and you still get hit. So that's a problem. My second playthrough, I'm playing as a warrior, and I have a feeling blocking is going to be a lot more important for me to learn. So we'll see how that goes. It's an interesting note in here, and I'm going to bring out here because I think part of my problem, like I said, is because the way I viewed the screen, blocking was forcing me to do a good block. I had to kind of disconnect for a second and start playing the game instead of just going with the flow. But I think that's just the way it works, and given time and practice, that will change. When it comes to combat, it also felt really weird to me that I didn't really have to worry about my companions. My companions are not taking damage. They are not going to go down. Only I was. I also, unlike like an Inquisition where I could take over, you know, if I went down, I could start playing as one of the other characters. That ain't going to happen. You go down and it's over. It is possible for some of your companions to have some revive capabilities. I never used those. I did make big use of my companion's ability to heal me at times, but the combat is very much squarely on what happens to Rook, and it led to some interesting things, though. There were some fights where, hey, I'm out of potions, I'm really hurt, whatever, and I essentially hid somewhere for a moment. Got myself out of the line of fire, gave time for the cooldowns on my companions to get to where they could cast a heal on me before I went back into doing things. Just kind of didn't feel terribly heroic to hide. There's also some times where the combat ended while I was in that mode, because my companions literally finished off the combat. It just, yeah, at that moment, it felt weird. To some degree, the game was finishing without me. You know, the battle was finishing without me. It just kind of felt weird. But it does put the focus of that aspect of gameplay on your Rook, your character. So, in that regards, it's successful. Mission-based versus the more open-world aesthetic of Inquisition. Hey, it's good, and I don't mind mission-based. I would argue that the Mass Effect games are very mission-based. They give you a feel of open world, but you're just traveling across the open world to get to a mission, you know. So, it's exactly what you're doing here in most cases. But then they created these maps, these sprawling maze-like maps, because, well, it seems like they wanted to give you the ability to do a little bit of the open world kind of, you know, wander around and investigate and do things. You know, I like some of the verticality in the maps, but the maze-like structure really started to drive me a little nuts at times. I really don't like when I can see, hey, I want to get to that spot that's 10 feet away, but I got to go 100 yards that way, up 3 levels, across, down through here, across, down the... Shouldn't be that hard. It's fine. I made it work. It's just not my thing. Trying to find my spot here, my notes here. I said, good verticality, I mentioned that, but sometimes aggravating. And that led to some times where I just didn't bother figuring out how to get to that chest behind that gate, because if all the things I got to find to flip and twist and whatever to get to that thing are not, if I'm going to have to go up 3 levels over here, down here, run, I just wasn't going to take the time to do it. The game's going to play fine whether I do it or not. So it'd be nice to have everything, but and when I'm doing my playthrough that I'm not recording, I may spend some more time on those things. But when I was recording, I wasn't going to waste 20 minutes on that. Ran into the same thing with some of the other puzzles. Especially the ones with the turning statues. I mean, I didn't even bother with the one at the lighthouse. I have done most of it already on my second playthrough, but I just felt no interest in it the first time through. Another one of the ones I just quite frankly brute forced. I mean, four statues, 4 positions, that 256 possibilities. You can literally walk through those in a few minutes because the statues were all there together. Another place where that was possible, I did take the time to hunt down because, well, the game was nice enough to actually put navigation points to where the clues were, and there was usually some nice treasure there. But truth is, I spent like 25 minutes gathering all that information and then coming back and doing what I could have done in over 10 minutes, brute force. It gave me some more background, some more lore. That was nice, but again, some people love that kind of thing, and I'm a little less. If there's a good side to it, it could be brute forced. You didn't have to spend that 25 minutes if you didn't really want to. Smashing things to get the material and the gold. Oh, I'm sorry, is this the 1980s? Running around smashing things. Running through the Necropolis. I'm running through the city of the dead, smashing things as I go. I think I'm going to be escorted to the door and kicked out and then invited never to come back. Running through Docktown, smashing things. I'm going to have the city guard on my rear end really fast. It very squarely takes me out of the role-playing of the game and puts me into the game part of the game. Sorry, playing a BioWare game because I want the story. I want to make some decisions. I want to do those things. And this was very gamey to me. Some people love it. I'm sure some people dearly, dearly love it. Artistic style. I've seen some headlines where people talk about not liking the artistic style. I've seen some comments where people say they don't like the artistic style. What can I say? It's not my first choice of artistic styles. It's perfectly adequate. It did not detract from the game for me. If anything, I've seen a few of the graphic novels, the comic books, whatever the right term is. I've seen a few of those. The artistic style reminded me mostly of those. Not my thing, but it was perfectly good. Each of the Dragon Age games has had its own kind of graphic look and feel. I mean, if you look, you're going to see that my Rook, somewhere in these pictures going by, you'll see several pictures of my Rook, a female elf who I definitely built to look like the elf style that you see in Dragon Age 2, because for me, that's always been the way elves should look, and that's the way I built my character. I talked about the character generator, but boy, can you do a ton with that if you really want to. If you don't like the artistic style and that's enough to detract from playing the game, I'm sorry, then don't play the game. I don't get it. I shouldn't say I don't get it. I see stuff that's definitely really primitive graphics that I never get around to trying because I assume things based upon that. But this is not an art style that should make you assume that something is ancient in that way or something. So I don't know. It's up to you. If the art style bothers you that much, then don't play the game. It's interesting, some of the choices they made on the returning characters. I mean, I have to go back and look at Harding in Inquisition, but I don't remember feeling like, like her face was, 5 million freckles, which is what it feels like in this game. Morrigan I recognized instantly, although she looks a little different, but time has passed and they they certainly added some Plymouth-like touches to make very clear who this Morrigan is. Varric, older Varric, but easily recognizable. Dorian. What the heck? You gave me a Dorian that doesn't look like any Dorian I could picture. If it hadn't been... When I heard the voice, I knew who it was. Until then, I did not know. I don't get it. But Dorian's a character that steps in for one scene here, one scene there. Not a companion. Not a big deal. I could pick on it, but it just didn't matter. Music. Hans Zimmer and Lorne Balfe. Two composers I dearly love, and you've been hearing the music from the game here as I talk. I am not familiar if Hans Zimmer's done any music for games before. He's done a lot of different movies. I dearly love his music. I'm not as familiar with Lorne Balfe's, but what I've heard of his, I dearly love as well, and I certainly caught little phrases here and there in this music that I instantly knew, oh, it was Lorne who wrote this, because I know that from this other piece of music he's done. Good music can go a long way for covering up other kinds of sins, and this is good music. It is a soundtrack I will be listening to. And for those who know me, they know I love my soundtrack music. I've been listening to soundtrack music since I was a kid. And remember, old guy here, when the Star Wars soundtrack first came out, you'd open up that big album, that big LP, and there was a sheet in there with notes about the themes in each of the pieces, each of the tracks, and that forever locked me into understanding how and learning more about how soundtrack music's written and how it's put together and the role it plays and the many different ways it's done. I really love soundtrack music, and this is a good soundtrack. It's funny, I think of Hans Zimmer sometimes almost more sound design, but this was more soundtrack. I've seen some headlines and stuff that seem to indicate that some people are questioning the storytelling in this game, and I'll be honest right out front. I'm no writer, no scripter, but I have always had an interest in how stories are structured, and I have been GMing a tabletop role-playing games since 1979. Again, remember, old guy, okay? So I do know a few things about how stories are structured, and I'm the guy who I'm watching a show on TV or watching a movie somewhere, and I'm going, okay, from here they can go these 3-4 different directions. They can do this, they can do that, and that's not me not liking the story. That's me, if I can really kind of see that there's these different options and I don't know which way they're going to go. That's great stuff. I'd say overall these are good stories. They probably range from adequate to excellent. The problems, I'm going to say there's two big problems I have, and they both really revolve around the main story. And they both revolve around some things that happen in the final section of the main story. And that's why I'm going to have to be careful here about how I talk so as not to give off big spoilers. There is, of course, as one would expect, a big twist. No, trust me, I love it when the big twist comes along. I've just described how I see stories, right? So when the big twist comes along and it catches me off guard, I can really love that if I can go back and see what I missed. Oh, here were the pointers that told me that this is what was going on. I may have a different opinion after playing through this game the second time, but the big twist, I really don't feel there was good foreshadowing. So far, what I've seen in my second playthrough is all stuff that it's called the only person who saw that as foreshadowing is somebody who reads 15 different meanings to every word of every sentence that they read. I don't have the time or the energy to live in that world. So the big twist feels more like a surprise than a well-crafted story element that was well foretold for me. Is it surprising? Not really. It makes sense, but I don't feel like it was foreshadowed well. There's also a heavy element of regret in the themes at the end. And maybe it has something to do with my age and life experience. I was just having trouble feeling it. My rook. Your rook will have to make some decisions along the way, and some of them have ethical implications, whatever, but I had trouble feeling regret for any of the bad outcomes because, well, most cases, you were making decisions based upon what information you had at hand, however adequate or inadequate it was. You make the best decision you can, you move along. And whatever happens, you got to deal with, and you may kick yourself about over it, but regret is something I'm just not going to carry a ton of regret with me at that point, especially not for a game. So I had trouble feeling that theme, which was the other big element in the final part of the storytelling, that just didn't work for me. For other people, it probably does, but again, I don't feel like it was well enough woven into all the earlier stuff that I had a reason to feel it myself, and so I didn't see Rook feeling it. Choices. BioWare games, I mean, I'm expecting to have to make difficult choices in a BioWare game. Difficult choices, ethical choices. Those are the best kind of difficult choices in my world. The only real, I feel, ethical dilemmas that came out in Veilguard are, though, pretty much at the end of each companion story, they're going to kind of turn to you and say, oh, should I do A or B? Should I be A or B? And I felt really put on the spot. You know, it's one thing if you ask me my opinion of what I think you should be or do, but you shouldn't say what you tell me what to do. And that's how I felt. And they probably didn't really have huge results in the story because basically, I know it's not like on a tabletop role-playing game where if your players take off in an unexpected direction, well, you improv and you keep things going. And in a computer role-playing game, the developers have to keep dragging the story back towards the main plot line that is intended because there's just not enough hours to make the game that literally you can do anything, anywhere, anytime, and have the world respond appropriately. I'm sure there's people working on AI to do that, and I don't even doubt that we may see some decent stuff in the not too distant future, but that decent stuff is not going to develop anything that'll truly make you make a hard decision. It's not going to develop you any interesting plot lines that are anything new. It's all that at least for now still requires a person involved to take things in unexpected ways. So in the end, the only decisions I spent much time on were a few of the companion story ones. Everywhere else that you had to make a choice, it really was usually, hey, do we run and do A or do we run and do B? And truthfully, with the information you had at hand, you had no way of knowing what the implications of each choice were. So you made a choice and you moved along, and you knew you'd have to live with the results. And again, maybe that's something that comes with age. You make your choices and you live with the results, and that's you may kick yourself a bit about it. Wish you'd done things different. But you don't dwell on it. You don't live in regret about it. You move along. So the stories in general, I'm going to keep myself focused on the main story and the companion stories. There are certainly lots of little side stories in there. Despite what I've said about the main story so far, I think it's generally a good story. The events seem to happen in a reasonable fashion. You're moved along. They kind of hammer you on the head a lot about having to get your group all settled in so you can take on the main story, which was their way of saying, do the companion stories and then do the main story. Because after you finish the main story, you're not going to be able to do any others. And there are implications of not having the companion stories done. But like I said, from a storytelling perspective, they could have done the foreshadowing better. They could have done a whole lot of things better. Although I do think they made a game that is accessible by both people who've played all the Dragon Age games and for somebody who this is their first Dragon Age game. But that probably handcuffed them a little bit on some of what they could do. The companion stories. Lucanus. Lucanus, the expert, the assassin who, due to his setbacks, is probably questioning his talents a little bit, losing a bit of faith in himself. Well, as I like to put it, literally struggling with his inner demons. It's a well-told story. It's kind of fun. It's nothing new. You've seen lots of stories of people wrestling with their inner demons. You've seen lots of stories of people wrestling with their confidence in themselves. Spike can be kind of funny at times, but it was well told and it is a fine story. Valara, Tinker Mage, trying to uncover the past knowledge of Elvinen and then having to wrestle with the implications of if she truly uncovers it, what that information, what that knowledge could do to the world she lives in. Also struggling with her guilt over what happened to her brother, and then how that plays into fighting yet another god, Anaris, a forgotten one. That will bind those two stories together. Guilt over past things, that's a story you've seen before. Having your life passion kind of come into conflict with what you think might be best for the world is also a story you've seen before. It's done well, and I enjoy Nev. I enjoy Valara. She's got a little bit of that Morton Solus in her. Not quite the hamster on speed that Morton is, but she's got that. And it was kind of fun to watch her develop over time. Nev, should I mention Nev? She's the next one on my notes. Teventer Mage, detective, trying to protect Docktown from all the bad things that are happening. Little hard for me to understand if I fully understand her story fully, because due to the one big decision you make early in the game, she entered that hardened status and developed in a different way than all the other characters. But it seemed like the big story there was in trying to protect Docktown, that decision between kind of, do you do it quietly in the background or do you take on the role of the protector of Docktown kind of thing. So, a person doing what they can for who they can. Nice story. Nothing terribly new there. Davrin, Elven Grey Warden, the bodyguard, the big protector guy, suddenly forced to, by circumstances, to have to learn how to be more nurturing and a caretaker. Being a caretaker is different than being a bodyguard. Story we've seen before. Reasonably well told. If you get into a song, you'll really enjoy that story. If you find a song... Sorry, I'm the type who was walking through Docktown. I was stopping and petting all the cats, so Wasan kind of fit that category for me. You either like that or not. So, Harding, our dwarven scout, struggling with becoming something else. Getting a connection to the past that's opening up new aspects of herself. Good story. Opened up a lot of lore about the past, tied in well with the main storyline as well. But that story of someone who's kind of, thinks they're in their niche and doing their thing, and then something happens and they discover a whole new side of themselves, and struggle with integrating that change in their world. Is a story, again, you've seen before. But it's done well. I can't think of Emmerich, but kind of dear, sweet Emmerich. Word if somebody said, hey, there's a necromancer in this story, and you're not expecting me to say dear, sweet. Okay. I really enjoy getting a chance to look into necromancers of Navarre. A whole different... Sorry, in this genre, the word necromancer is pretty much synonymous with evil bastard. These necromancers are anything but. They are caretakers to the dead. They are caretakers to the spirits. And it was fun to get that view and that story. Watching him struggle with his own mortality and understanding, he was afraid of dying himself at some point, and his desire, therefore, to become a lich and actually being in contact with the liches of the necropolis, and knowing that avenue was open to him, but being scared to take that step because, well, you could die in the process of trying to become a lich, and he's scared of dying. It was a good story. And then, especially when they reach the point in the story where he's got to choose between that long-term ambition and something else he wants to do. But that idea of struggling with mortality and all that, you've seen those stories before. That it's told in this case from the point of view of a really caring and nurturing person, as opposed to some tortured person, is what you'd usually see in most stories. That was refreshing. And finally, we get to Tosh. Tosh had barely been on the screen, probably 20 seconds, and I was like, oh, great, here's my sullen teenager dragon hunter. What a great combination of terms, sullen teenager dragon hunter. Tosh's story is all about the struggle of finding out who you are. And they could have stuck purely with that struggle between that rigid Canary background and the open, freewheeling Ravani background that is her world. And it would have been a perfectly acceptable, boring, been there, done that story. They could have done that. And here's where we're going to get to my final caveat. And I'm going to give this caveat, and then I'm going to wait a few seconds. There's going to be I'll put a timestamp up here somewhere for those who might want to skip what comes after the caveat. I think the caveat will make plain kind of where I stand on some things, and if that makes you worry about triggers, then you can skip it. If that's going to throw red meat to you, well, that's a kind of trigger. And if that's the problem I want to play, please skip it. But that's your choice. I want to be certain that I'm kind of warning you. But I want you to listen to the caveat first, so that you know where I'm at. So here we go. I am a straight, male, white, Anglo-Saxon Protestant. My kind is the default norm in the world I live in. The kind of people that made the world I live in. The kind of people that every law, social norm, etc. made in the last 1,000+ years had in mind when it was created. It is not my place to talk about what it's like to be a woman. It is not my place to talk about what it's like to be a person of color. It is not my place to talk about what it's like to be a person who's struggling with gender. It is my place to respectfully listen when those who can do. And it is my place to then ask questions that I can understand better. Yes, I'm about to climb up on a kind of a moral high horse here, and if you're not ready to deal with that, somewhere up here, somewhere, I'll tell you the timestamp to jump to skip that. And it'll be just a little couple sentence summary at the end about that'll avoid some of those language. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm on my moral high horse now. Tasha's story. She's a sullen teenager because she's struggling with who she is. She's struggling because there's all these forces pushing at her that just don't seem right. And like all teenagers, teenage angst comes. What teenage angst is that you're starting to know who you are not, but you do not yet know who you are. And until you know who you are, you don't have that place, that ground to stand on and withstand the forces that are pushing on you, or the ground to stand on to allow you to push back in a constructive way. So you're either quiet and grin and bear it and hold all that energy in, or you lash out. But either way, It's not a terribly good result. That's what it means to be a sullen teenager. That's the cause. And we've all been there to some degree. One of the things Tosh is struggling with was what I previously mentioned, that rigid Canary culture versus the very open, freewheeling Romani culture. The other thing she's struggling with is her own gender identity. Let's be clear. I've listened enough to know that there's more than one story about struggling with gender identity, and this is one of them. I've seen some people complaining about that somewhere. And it's like, be happy someone's telling the story, and then find some place to tell your story. You know, even when you have a story to tell, respectfully listen when others tell their stories. That's the expectation. That's the social contract, okay? You want people to listen, you have to listen too. It can feel an awful lot like this game is beating you about the head with this story. Every interaction she has with every companion, the first few interactions are going to probably revolve around this. But quite honestly, if you track that true for just about everybody's story, that's true for a lot of the conversations. I think it feels like it takes over the game or it feels like it's beating you over the head with it, partly because while the story of struggling with who you are is certainly a story you've heard before, this particular version of it is one that you may not have. And even if you have, gets into some really uncomfortable places. And we've all been in those uncomfortable places. It may just not have been for gender reasons. So we have to face the fact that we may have some unresolved issues like that in our past. It makes us uncomfortable. We may realize that if we want to treat that person well, we have to change some of our own behavior. That's uncomfortable. Let me get it clear right from my life experience. If someone's telling you something and it makes you uncomfortable, it's time to listen. Doesn't mean they're right, but until you listen to what they're saying, you do not know how to react. And this story is going to make people uncomfortable. I appreciate that things along the way in this story, like there's periods where she's struggling with the terminology she's learning from others in order to try to understand and explain where she's at. I love it, because part of what some people are uncomfortable about is they have to learn a whole new terminology. I'm an old guy. They, them is the third person plural to me. It feels weird to use they or them to refer to an individual, even though we've all used it as a little cheat sheet along the way because English has no first person neuter way to do that. So that was how you did it. Heaven help you if you refer to somebody's baby as it. That will get you in trouble fast. Sorry, looking back up at my notes to catch my guards. Catch where I'm at here. So at time to feel like Veilguard is beating you over the head with it, so it stands out. But I think that's the main reason it stands out. And all the other stories we've heard here before, we've heard before told in some similar way, so they don't stand out, and we know how to categorize them, and we know how to put them in a safe place to deal with them. This story demands that we listen, and it's not comfortable, and we don't necessarily know how to categorize it and place it so that it is safe. And that's the problem. And if you're not comfortable with not feeling safe, then this story is going to drive you nuts. You have two choices when you're confronted with this kind of thing. You've really got more, but I'm going to stick with two, really. When you're confronted with somebody's story like this, you have a choice. You have a choice to listen and then to modify your behavior and modify how you interact with the community and do all those things in order to take that person into account and to make your community a better place. That's one of your choices. Your other choice, well, there's a choice to do nothing, and then other choice, which is what I see happening for some people, is to lash out. To let that sullen teenager of their own out, lash out at those who are different, and in process, they make the community worse. They make the community a worse place to be. Okay? You either choose to greet people where they're at, or you don't. And if you don't, then don't be surprised when things aren't as good as they could be. There are plenty of people who I see using the word woke around Veilguard, and this is the only story I can pick on. I can see that seems to invoke that term. Could invoke somebody responding in that way. I'm not a big student of the alt-right. I'm probably no more than a lot of people do because they scare me. They make me uncomfortable. If you're willing to trash the whole game because of the one story, I think that says something more about you than the game. If you don't want to play the game because of the one story, that's your choice. And I can respect that. But to lash out at the whole game as being woke and having a woke agenda seems to me to be you using the game as a reason to push your agenda. What else can I say? Now, in a few seconds, I'll be down off of my high horse. And we'll get back to things. I think I said there'd be a few sentences. So, Tasha's story is about a person struggling to figure out who they are. That is what the teenage years are about. As I said earlier, you tend to know what you aren't, but you do not yet know who you are. And that's her struggle. And a lot of mommy issues in this struggle, too. But that's an interesting part of the story. I've seen some people questioning whether this is dark fantasy. I don't know. Is it advertised as dark fantasy? I don't remember. Or is it just the assumption because it's Dragon Age, it's dark fantasy? I don't know. What makes something dark fantasy? That's the question I don't have an answer for. Certainly in the earlier Dragon Ages, you have more of the characters kind of sniping at each other and doing whatever. There's a little bit of that here, but people being nasty to one another does not make something dark. It just makes people nasty. Having to make difficult decisions. If you're talking about ethical decisions in which there's no real good choice, that's not a bad place to say. To choose between two bad options, is it the tone? I don't know. Is this dark fantasy? I would argue that if Dragon Age Origins came out today with its content today, would people see it as dark fantasy or not? The world's a different place. I don't have an answer to the question. I enjoy the game. It tells a story that's a little different in tone, a little different in that it does get a little bit of you are the one, but the truth is it's more the gadget that's the one. All the Dragon Age stories are ultimately hero stories. You have to make some more or less palatable choices along the way, but I'd say the characters are certainly heroes. Mass Effect, you've got the full renegade option. I suppose you could do that in Dragon Age to some degree. You've got the ability in some conversations to kind of really go down, but that's in your control if you want to take it to that full kind of anti-hero kind of thing. I don't know what to tell you. Is it dark fantasy? Is that category even mean anything anymore? Wrap up. I like stories that make me feel something, and let me be very clear about what I mean here. For this conversation, going, oh, wow, is not feeling something. That's a reaction. A cool graphic is a cool graphic, but it doesn't necessarily make me feel anything. It makes me react. The action combat, action RPG, it gets the adrenaline flowing and the endorphins going. That's great stuff. But that's not emotion. When the game tried to invoke the regret theme, it was trying to make me feel something. It did not really succeed. I understood what they were going for, but And I said, there's that part of my brain that's said, okay, and move along. Next thing. This part didn't work as well as I want, but I see what they're going for. Let's go. When my character, I did a relationship with Balara, and I do appreciate that. At least with the relationship with Lara, there's no sex scene. I mean, when I was a younger guy, hey. Today it feels a little creepy. Sorry, that's where I'm at. So it was nice to have the relationship kind of happen off screen, more or less. Anything physical. I appreciate that. Others probably would have rather have had something else. But having Balara fumble around trying to find the right words to talk about that relationship, that felt nice. That analytical part of my mind that tears stories apart was able to step aside and just let that part of me that was willing to empathize and live in the moment just live in the moment and enjoy the conversation and enjoy the emotions being expressed. When Emmerich discusses his concerns about mortality, when Davrin is struggling about how to care for Hassan, how to, like I said, shift from that protector mode to more of a nurturing mode. When Tasha's mother is struggling with how to care for Tosh and how to express her care for Tosh, those invoked actual feelings. In so many RPGs, the story just seems to be there to provide context for the combat. You play because of the combat, and the stories people tell afterwards are about the combat. In Dragon Age games, in BioWare games in general, and Dragon Age games, I would say the combat's there to connect the story. It provides, it provides that jolt of adrenaline, get the dopamine going up here, whatever, so that, you feel good. But the story is, if you play it again, it's probably the story while you come back. Oh, to be fair, I've played the older Dragon Age games and the Mass Effect games multiple times, trying different combinations of things because I did want to see how that affected gameplay. But part of affecting gameplay is affecting conversation options and affecting things like that. When I talk to people who haven't played Dragon Age or Mass Effect, I'm perfectly willing to talk about how combat works. Be very careful about talking about the stories because I don't want to ruin that aspect of the game for them. Veilguard fits that mold for me. It doesn't always do it perfectly, but it does do it well. The combat's good. It gets the adrenaline flowing. Hey! But it's the stories and the characters I want to talk about. I'll have that one conversation when my wife goes to play it the first time, and if she's struggling a little bit with something in combat, I'll talk about that. But the things I really want to talk to her about are the stuff about the characters and the story. And if that's what matters to you, Veilguard succeeds in that regard. So thank you for taking time out to listen to my thoughts. If you want to see more content like this, hit the like button, subscribe, leave some comments. I'm perfectly willing to respond to any comments that are not nasty. I'm generally willing to discuss just about anything. But it can be very hard to discuss some things in an online forum. If someone gets downright offensive or whatever, I will remove those comments. Trust me. But you can talk to me about just about anything. So, and I'm sure by saying that, some people are going to start testing things. We'll see what happens. But thank you for being on here. And again, hope you have a good one.